But was Princess Diana murdered by the Secret Service on the orders of the British establishment? She died in Paris in a high-speed car crash, trying to escape the paparazzi.
Because she was such an extraordinary woman, people find it completely unacceptable that somebody like that should have such an ordinary death, a car crash.
Her companion, Dodi El-Fayed, and their driver were also killed. The French police concluded it was a tragic accident. But Dodi's grieving father has refused to accept this verdict.
This is the most famous, the most beautiful lady in the world, right? She is the mother of the future king. They've been murdered with my son.
Conspiracy theories have gripped the public imagination as a result of doubts raised about the French crash investigation. Were blood samples switched, which showed Diana's driver was drunk? Why has a crucial witness, the driver of a second car involved in the crash, never been identified? How could it take close on 2 hours to get Princess Diana to a hospital just 4 miles away?
The more we are left with so many questions unanswered, the more we're left saying, well, there's only one answer to all this, that she was taken out.
The former head of the Metropolitan Police has spent nearly 3 years reinvestigating the crash.
This is a very intricate investigation. Every single aspect of conspiracy theories and the like will be looked at by my team.
This week, he's due to deliver his report. Tonight, we investigate if there was a conspiracy to murder Princess Diana. Paris, August 30th, 1997. The Ritz Hotel. Princess Diana and Dodi El-Fayed hurry into the hotel owned by Dodi's father. Hounded by the paparazzi, they're forced to abandon plans for a romantic meal at an exclusive restaurant. Dodi decides to take Princess Diana back to his apartment on the Champs-Élysées. Henri Paul, the deputy head of security, is called back to drive the stressed couple. A plan to avoid the paparazzi is hatched. Their usual driver and the backup security vehicle are sent to the front of the Ritz. Princess Diana, Dodi, Henri Paul and bodyguard Trevor Rees-Jones attempt to slip out of the back of the hotel. But the paparazzi are not fooled and give chase. Rather than taking the direct route to Dodi's apartment, the Mercedes tries to outrun the paparazzi. They head for a dual carriageway by the River Seine. Four minutes later, the car enters the Alma Tunnel.
Diana, Princess of Wales, has died after a car crash in Paris. The French government announced her death.
This is CNN breaking news.
In Paris, France tonight, a tragedy. Britain's Princess Diana has been in an automobile accident.
Princess's companion, Dodi El-Fayed, and the car's chauffeur were killed in the accident. A bodyguard in the car was also badly injured.
Princess Diana's death was met with an outpouring of public grief. There was bewilderment that her life played out in the public gaze and guarded in its every move could be cut short so suddenly. Diana was just 36 years old. She left behind 2 young sons. Within hours of the crash, elaborate conspiracy theories started to appear on the internet, suggesting Princess Diana was murdered. Former royal correspondent Noel Botham claims she sensed danger.
Diana was fearful of her own death for the last few years of her life. Right up to the moment of the accident, she believed that somebody was out there to get her. And she was right.
The Diana crash investigation was the biggest in French history. It was carried out by the country's top police force, the Criminal Brigade. After 2 years, it concluded her death was a tragic accident. The driver of the Mercedes, Henri Paul, was held to blame for the crash. He was found to be drunk. But this has failed to satisfy the public clamour for answers. So was Diana's driver, Henri Paul, really drunk at the wheel? Just 8 hours after the accident, the French police carried out a post-mortem here at the Medical Legal Institute. Tests on Henri Paul's blood samples showed that he was clearly drunk. The results were meant to be confidential, but were leaked to the press.
The man driving the Princess of Wales' car was 3 times over the French drink-drive limit. Henri Paul, who also died in the accident, is now at the centre of investigations by French police.
Conspiracy theorists believe the leak was designed to close the case as quickly as possible and hide a much more elaborate plot.
Right from the very beginning, the police decided that they had an easy scapegoat, a man who was dead, a man who couldn't argue back. It was a setup. They wanted to blame this man. This news went round the world, and he was instantly labelled the killer of Princess Diana.
The refusal to accept the official verdict gained momentum. American investigative journalist Gerald Posner suggested the high alcohol reading in Henri Paul's blood could have been wrong.
I saw confidential reports from the first autopsy of Henri Paul. It was riddled with errors and omissions. The body itself was left out for several hours before it was refrigerated. Yeast could have grown, affecting the final results of what the blood level, alcohol levels were.
Serious errors were made at the morgue, which French officials initially denied. Henri Paul's blood samples were not labelled correctly. There was no log or record as to who had access to the samples. Skeptics maintain the blood was tampered with to frame the dead driver.
There were certainly mistakes and omissions made, as happens in many autopsies, but by the French hiding that information, they have given grist to the conspiracy theorists who believe that they are hiding evidence of a murder.
Mohammed Al-Fayed, the millionaire owner of Harrods, called a press conference shortly after the crash. His spokesman Michael Cole said he could show that their employee Henri Paul was not drunk.
Henri Paul did not have any appearance of being overexcited and drunk as a pig, a quotation which incidentally appears again in the Evening Standard this evening. You will see the evidence for yourself.
Before the world's press, they released CCTV from the Ritz.
Security manager. Next will be the concierge. And finally, Henri Paul.
Royal biographer Nicholas Davies finds the CCTV persuasive.
There was no suggestion at all in any of the pictures that I've ever seen of the CCTV to suggest that he wasn't stone cold sober. And we have no evidence at all from people saying, yes, I saw him drinking. So we must assume that he wasn't drunk and he wasn't drinking.
The footage also shows Henri Paul chatting to Diana's bodyguards, Trevor Rhys-Jones and Kes Wingfield.
The two bodyguards swore that Henri Paul was not drunk when he got in the car to drive Diana dirty. They said their job would have been on the line.
Henri Paul returned to the Ritz at 10 p.m. on the night of the crash. He'd been off duty for 3 hours. The French police checked to see if he'd been drinking in the bars close to his home near the hotel.
There was no single witness has come forward to say that he was drinking. And we also know that only 3 days before he had had a rigorous pilot's medical examination, and there was no suggestion in that he was a drinker or a drunkard.
Henri Paul had been a pilot for over 20 years and had clocked up 600 hours of flying time. Claude Garec was Henri Paul's best friend. He had lunch with Paul on the day he died.
I absolutely don't believe that the accident was the fault of my friend. If you can fly a plane at night at 155 miles an hour in the rain, you know what you are doing.
Within days of the crash, French officials realized the controversy over whether Henri Paul was drunk or not was getting out of hand. They ordered a second post-mortem. The results were the same as the first. He was 3 times over the French limit. Professor Pounder is a leading forensic pathologist. He analysed the post-mortem results for the British Medical Journal.
The second post-mortem examination, in terms of the toxicological analysis, was the best one could expect of anyone. It really was a first-class analysis of the presence of drugs or alcohol in the body. They took hair specimens and other tissue specimens, so that as a result of those analyses, we know that the blood alcohol level is reliable.
The tests also revealed traces of a drug used to treat alcoholics. The concentrations suggested he'd been taking it for at least 3 months, along with the antidepressant Prozac.
What is absolutely clear is that Henri Paul had been drinking heavily, and he was drunk when he was driving that vehicle. Not only that, he was taking a drug, an antidepressant, which he should not be drinking while he was taking that drug. And both the alcohol and the drug in combination would have impaired his ability to drive the motor vehicle.
But both post-mortems yielded an unusual finding that was seized upon by those convinced of a cover-up. Henri Paul's blood samples contained unusually high levels of carbon monoxide. Mohammed Al-Fayed suspected foul play.
If you have a carbon monoxide in a blood of 24%, you can't walk. For I am certain there is a full play. It's not Henri Paul blood. And straight away, drunken driver, drugged, it's just unbelievable.
Conspiracy theorists now fixed on the idea that the driver's blood samples had been switched.
I was told there were 22 people who died in Paris that night which were investigatable deaths for one reason or another. One of them was a man who had drunk half a bottle or more of vodka, who had sat in his car having tied a hose pipe from the exhaust to the inside of the car, and he killed himself with carbon monoxide poisoning. That man's blood, according to my police spokesman, who I got in the pathologist's lab, that man's blood is the blood that was substituted for Henri Paul's.
Martine Montet, the head of the French judicial police who investigated the crash, is outraged at the suggestion.
These stories of switched test tubes are nonsense. Henri Paul's blood samples have never been switched.
She says framing Henri Paul would have required a huge conspiracy, corrupting a whole chain of police and forensic investigators.
The people at the criminal brigade, the morgue, and the toxicology laboratories are all highly respected specialists. They've worked on important crime scenes, on terrorist attacks. You think that these people would compromise themselves by switching blood samples?
Professor Pounder believes there is an innocent explanation for the high carbon monoxide in Paul's blood.
Carbon monoxide, as a result of cigar smoking, can be easily as high as 20%. Once we're aware that Henri Paul was a heavy cigar smoker, we can readily explain the carbon monoxide level, and we need look no further.
Recently, French officials took one final step to confound their critics. We've discovered they tested Henri Paul's blood and matched it with his parents' DNA. The blood was his. It wasn't switched. The official investigation maintains the Mercedes car carrying Princess Diana was driving too fast. But skeptics suspect it's another attempt to demonize Henri Paul and hide the real story. Jean-Claude Mulez was Montet's deputy in the criminal brigade. His team concluded that before it entered the Alma tunnel, Diana's car was going between 75 and 95 miles per hour. The speed limit is just 30 miles per hour.
The driver of the Mercedes almost certainly lost control of the vehicle here, which explains why he braked and why there are tire marks on the tarmac. The experts examined these facts, and some of them concluded that he was driving at a very, very high speed.
Working from the official French police map of the accident site, we've reconstructed the crash. For a speeding car, the approach to the Alma tunnel is difficult. It involves a left turn and a sharp dip. It's here where the car appears to lose control before hitting the 13th pillar.
The road has a downward slope of 6%. If the slope is taken at high speed, there's a small pull on the steering wheel, which could explain why the driver lost control of the vehicle.
The Alma tunnel is an accident black spot. In the 15 years before Princess Diana's death, 8 people died and another 8 were seriously injured there. But conspiracists don't accept that the Mercedes was being driven at high speeds and was out of control. Noel Botham says he's found evidence which proves the car was going much slower than the official French account.
I discovered through a friendly solicitor in Paris who was acting for one of the principals in this investigation. That solicitor got hold of a photograph taken from the CCTV camera at the entrance to the Alma tunnel. It was taken a couple of seconds before Diana died.
Botham has a copy of the photograph which he claims shows the car was only travelling at 64 miles per hour.
It's taken through the windscreen of the car. It's very obviously a CCTV speed camera shot. You can very clearly see Henri Paul on the right, the driver. You can see Rhys Jones, the bodyguard, on the left here. In the back here are Diana and Dodie.
The head of the French investigation, Martin Montet, is adamant the picture was not from a CCTV camera.
We checked all the CCTV cameras for the whole route, from the back of the Ritz Hotel all the way to the tunnel. But unfortunately, no image was recorded.
Embarrassingly for the French authorities, it seems all the CCTV cameras along the route were switched off after 9 p.m. Noel Botham doesn't accept this and claims his picture is proof of a police cover-up.
They say that starting from the Ritz, which is next to the Ministry of Defence, that the cameras outside the Ministry of Defence weren't working, none of the cameras in the Place de la Concorde, the Rue de Rivoli, were working, or on this route, or at the entrance of the tunnel. All 11 cameras, for some reason, were not functioning correctly on that night, of all nights.
So where did it come from? We've established that the picture is one of those seized from the arrested paparazzi photographers. It was actually taken as the Mercedes pulled away from the Ritz. It's not a CCTV still from the Alma tunnel. So despite the conspiracists' attempts to prise open gaps in the police account, the available evidence suggests the Mercedes was travelling too fast. The crash investigation has one crucial piece of missing evidence. The conspiracists believe it's proof the fatal crash was engineered, and investigators are hiding the truth. It begins with Commander Mulez, who on the night found evidence that the Mercedes hit another car before it crashed.
I found orange, white and red bits of plastic on the ground. They looked like indicator lights from a car. The debris was grouped together. It was fresh. You could assume that it was probably from a collision between the Mercedes and another car.
Mulez also found a trail of white paint on the Mercedes. Forensic tests revealed the white paint and broken lights came from a Fiat Uno that had been manufactured between 1983 and 1987. There were 10,000 white Fiat Unos in France that matched that description and were still on the road. Our reconstruction shows what happened. As the Mercedes speeds towards the tunnel, the Uno comes down a slip road. The Mercedes speeds over the dip and loses control. It clips the back of a Fiat Uno before crashing. The Uno has never been found, and conspiracy theorists believe it's because the driver was part of the murder plot.
This was a vital witness to that accident. If he was an innocent person, he must have known he'd been hit by the Mercedes. He must have seen in his rear mirror the Mercedes hit the pillar, didn't stop, never came forward. Yet a vital witness. This is what determined in my mind this was not an accident.
The French search for the Fiat Uno focused on 2 districts west of Paris on the basis of a partial sighting of the number plate by 2 witnesses.
We must have checked between 3,500 to 4,000 vehicles over many, many months. We checked every single town in the 92nd and 78th districts. In each town, there were quite a few people who owned that type of vehicle.
3 months after the crash, the French police thought they'd found their man.
In the search of the database of white Fiat Unos registered in and around Paris, the police had zeroed in on one car they thought might fit the description, and 3 months after the accident, they detained Lee Van Tan, a 23-year-old at that time Vietnamese.
Lee Van Tan was a security guard who owned the right model of Fiat from the right year. It had been repainted from white to red the day after the Alma tunnel crash. He lived in the right area of Paris and owned a Rottweiler. An eyewitness remembered seeing a large dog in the back of the Uno. The police had plenty to ask Van Tan.
We investigated that man. We did forensic tests on his car. We found the white paint underneath the red paint and tested it. Then we looked into this man's whereabouts. We did everything we could, and in the end, we were able to clear him. We contacted Lee Van Tan. He told us he'd provided a witness to show that on the night of the crash, he was working as a security guard on the outskirts of Paris. But the forensic evidence has taken on a life of its own.
I've seen some of the confidential reports from the French police that they have not yet released to the public, which, contrary to their own public admissions, says that they did find a match between some of the rubber on the Mercedes and also the paint to Lee Van Tan's Fiat. It actually matched the exact brand of the paint.
The French police have closed the case on Lee Van Tan and scores of other Fiat owners. They've abandoned the hunt for the missing driver, leaving the conspiracists to develop their own explanation.
They did not wish to find who was driving the Fiat Uno because it could have led to, how can I put it, complications with determining whether she had been killed or whether it was an accident.
It's likely the British inquiry will find the absence of this crucial eyewitness a significant flaw in the French investigation, but reject the conspiracists' claim that the French police pulled their punches. In the immediate aftermath of the crash, every detail of what happened was analysed worldwide. American conspiracy theorists started to question the medical treatment Princess Diana received that night, and this began to shape their TV coverage.
For some as yet unexplained reason, it took 1 hour and 43 minutes from the time of the crash to deliver Diana to a hospital that was only 3.8 miles away.
Skeptics believe that when the car crash failed to kill Princess Diana outright, her treatment was deliberately delayed to ensure her death. The French ambulance service was on the scene 6 minutes after the crash. But skeptics point out that it was over 50 minutes before Diana began her journey to hospital. Dr. André Leonhardt reviewed the emergency service's response for the French investigation. This is his first interview.
Great efforts were made to safely remove the people from the wreckage of the car. Princess Diana, in particular, had to be placed on a stretcher to remove her from the car. While she was being removed, she suffered a brief cardiac arrest, so we needed time to stabilize her.
Witnesses were astonished to see the ambulance travelling at little over walking speed.
The transfer to the hospital was deliberately slow, because for people whose blood circulation is very unstable, we know even a slight acceleration or deceleration can cause cardiac arrest.
Princess Diana was transferred to the Pitié-Salpêtrière hospital, ignoring 5 other hospitals that were closer.
La Pitié-Salpêtrière was chosen for its expertise in treating serious trauma, most importantly, chest trauma.
Diana had suffered a massive tear in the main pulmonary vein to her heart.
Malgré la fermeture de cette plaie et un massage cardiaque externe puis interne de 2 heures, aucune efficacité circulatoire n'a pu être rétablie et le décès a été constaté à 4 heures du matin.
I don't think it's possible to stop rumors. If people want to believe in a conspiracy, it's impossible to prove them wrong. What is clear from all the medical staff and paramedics working that night is that they wanted to save the person in front of them. That is absolutely indisputable.
The French police have also been heavily criticised for the way they dealt with the accident scene.
and I found significant flaws in the French police probe at the accident scene. As a matter of fact, the accident scene wasn't even closed off for 1 hour until the chief of the French police arrived. Dozens of tourists and local French citizens were able to stroll around the scene of the crash, the car itself. Some took souvenirs with them. Nobody took witness names. Literally several dozen witnesses left that night without ever being even identified by the French police. So it started off bungling from the very get-go.
The tunnel was reopened just 4.5 hours after the accident. For the conspiracists, it smacks once again of a cover-up. They believe the authorities were hiding evidence of a murder.
Within hours, everything was removed, washed down, filtered as though, right, that's the end of that one. It's extraordinary that they should have got rid of any possible evidence that was there so quickly when the Princess of Wales was the person who had died.
The head of the French police inquiry says the passengers in the car were not the issue.
We were not going to block the traffic for 3 days or a week on such a busy road. I mean, we'd taken all our photos, measured everything, gone over the whole area with a fine-tooth comb. That is the process we use for any traffic accident.
Whatever the skeptics' claims of police failures and cover-ups that night, one simple fact remains hard to deal with.
What is certain is that she was not wearing a seatbelt, and this made things worse. We would like to think that if she had been wearing a seatbelt, we'd have been able to save her.
It's now nearly 10 years since Princess Diana died. People from all over the world still travel to the Alma Tunnel to pay their respects. In that time, conspiracy theorists have worked up an elaborate backstory to explain the means and motive for what they believe was a murder plot.
I believe that she was killed, and I believe our security services were behind it.
The conspiracy requires a reinterpretation of the events in Diana's life. Her fairy tale marriage to Prince Charles in 1981 captured the world's imagination. Her beauty and innocent charm reinvigorated the royal family. But the marriage disintegrated and the dream turned sour. In a break from tradition, she shared publicly her sense of being cast aside by the establishment.
People's agendas changed overnight. I was now separated, wife of the Prince of Wales. I was a problem. I was a liability, seen as. And how were we going to deal with her? They see me as a threat of some kind.
Diana refused to fade away. She championed causes with clear political overtones, campaigning against the use of landmines. She relished going beyond the brief of a traditional royal.
Diana was on a total collision course with the British establishment. She didn't trust the establishment, she didn't trust the security services in Britain because she had been bugged. Her home had been bugged at Kensington Palace. For years, she was aware that she was being watched and afraid that she was being watched.
In July 1997, just 6 weeks before her death, Princess Diana went on holiday to the south of France with an unlikely host, Mohammed Al Fayed. The Egyptian multimillionaire owner of Harrods was a controversial figure who'd been refused a British passport. Al Fayed's revenge was to reveal that he'd been secretly paying Conservative MP Neil Hamilton to ask questions about his case in Parliament. It was evidence of sleaze which helped bring down the last Conservative government.
Inviting herself on a holiday with Mohammed Al Fayed was Diana being at her naughtiest, at her most mischievous. This was a chance to poke a finger at the British establishment and the royal lovers, the toadyists, as she called them.
On the holiday, she met Mohammed's son, Dodi. The press speculated that their relationship could be serious. A fortnight later, the couple arrived in Paris. Dodi left the Ritz to pick up a ring that he'd ordered for Diana from this jewellery shop. 6 hours later, the couple were both dead. 5 days after the crash, Al Fayed's press spokesman, Michael Cole, attached no significance to the ring.
What that ring meant, we shall probably never know. And if the planet lasts for another 1,000 years, I'm quite sure that people will continue to speculate about its significance.
But 8 months later, Mohammed Al Fayed claimed the couple told him on the day they died the ring held a very special significance.
They called me, say what's happening, and then we're having dinner, and after that going back to the apartment. And we're coming back on Sunday, and on Monday they're going to declare their engagements.
Did Dodi tell you that? Did Diana tell you that?
Dodi told me that, and Diana told me that on Saturday evening at 10 o'clock in the hotel.
The possibility of Diana marrying Dodi Fayed challenged every single idea of the British monarchy, or every traditional idea of the British monarchy.
But was marriage to Dodi on the cards? Princess Diana's close friend, Rosa Monckton, was on holiday with her 3 weeks before she died.
She talked about him, and in my view, it was very much a fling that, you know, most of us have in our teens, but she didn't because she was engaged when she was 19. She was happy at the time. Yes, she was. I mean, I couldn't and wouldn't deny that, but it's not something that would have lasted. She did say that he'd given her a lot of presents, almost too many presents, and she said, I know there is a ring, he's told me there's a ring, and she said, it's going very firmly, Rosa, on my right hand. So no, she wasn't contemplating marriage with him.
But equally, Mohammed Al Fayed will never be persuaded to abandon the word of his own son. He believes not only that the marriage was a serious proposition, but also that it provided the motive for the British establishment to commit murder.
Prince Philip will never have allowed my son, as an Egyptian, naturally tanned, will be the stepfather of Prince William and the future king.
Mohammed Al Fayed claims Prince Philip was behind the assassination plot.
You feel that what happened was caused by, authorized by Prince Philip?
Definitely through the security service, 100%. Himself, as a racist at the core, it's well known. Grew up with the Nazi. You think he will accept my son to marry Princess Diana, the mother of the future king?
It's a shocking allegation, but Mohammed Al Fayed is not alone in believing the couple were murdered. Conspiracy theorists believe the security services orchestrated the crash. It casts the events of that night in a completely different light. The most direct route from the Ritz Hotel to Dodi's apartment was along the Champs-Élysées. For some reason, the driver, Henri Paul, set off in a different direction, heading west towards the Alma Tunnel. Conspiracists believe he took this route not to escape the paparazzi, but because he was told to by his intelligence handlers.
Henri Paul is told what to do by, presumably, the French Secret Service. And why would he be told that? There's only one reason, because something was planned. And I maintain very strongly that what was planned was the killing of Diana.
It's accepted that Henri Paul, as deputy head of security at the Ritz, came into contact with a number of security services, but conspiracists go much further.
Henri Paul was in the pay of British intelligence, particularly MI6. He was in the pay of the Paris Police and Paris Special Branch. He was in the pay of the American intelligence services. And Henri Paul made a great deal of money out of it. After his death, it was discovered that Henri Paul had £140,000 in 6 bank accounts in Paris.
A British spy gave credence to the theory. Former MI6 agent Richard Tomlinson came forward with a sensational claim about Henri Paul.
It's been well established that he went missing for 2 or 3 hours on the night of his death. It could well be that he was with an MI6 handler during that time.
But there's a problem with the conspiracy. It's potentially a suicide mission. It requires Henri Paul to be both perpetrator and patsy.
Obviously, he was tricked as much as his clients, as Dodi and Diana, because he didn't take that route knowing he was going to die, clearly.
Jean-Claude Mulez investigated Henri Paul's links to the secret services and found he was just a low-level informant for the French police.
The person in charge of security at a large Parisian hotel automatically has contacts, good contacts with the police. He'll know the important people who are coming in and out of Paris. But to say that every month he receives a fat envelope from the secret services, in my opinion, is just absurd.
Soon after the accident, a witness came forward who claimed to be driving through the tunnel on the night. Francois Levistre's story neatly fitted the conspiracy of Secret Service involvement in the crash. On an ITV programme, Levistre was questioned and claimed to have seen a massive flash of light before the accident.
The flash? Was this flash like a photo flash?
No, it was stronger than a photo flash. The Mercedes goes left, right, left.
ITN royal correspondent of the time, Nick Owen, developed the theory.
Now, this is an anti-personnel device, quite legal to buy in the UK, which sets off one enormously powerful flash of light. Shine this in somebody's eyes, and they'll be stunned, disabled, blinded for several minutes.
So was this flash gun the spook's weapon of choice? Ex-spy Richard Tomlinson claimed MI6 planned to use exactly this piece of kit to orchestrate a fatal car crash in a tunnel. The target was former Yugoslavian President Slobodan Milosevic. The death of Diana was straight out of an MI6 assassination blueprint.
The witness reported there was a very bright light in the tunnel, and as soon as I heard that, that made me click 2 and 2 things together. I think, oh, that is exactly one of the proposals that was used in the Milosevic document. And the combination of the bright light and the tunnel made me think straight away, well, maybe it wasn't an accident.
It was exactly the same system, same plan as was put into operation to kill Diana. There were no differences at all. It was an MI6 originated plan put into action not in a tunnel in Switzerland, but in a tunnel in Paris.
Mohammed Al-Fayed was convinced that he discovered the method by which MI6 murdered Princess Diana and his son.
It's not an accident. It is a murder, a very tragic murder. The car, when they left the Ritz, being followed up by MI6. One of the motorcycles with the floodlights blind Henri Paul. And this is definitely exactly what happened.
The world's media seized on the conspiracy story, but the French police had immediate doubts.
If there had been a flash, it would have blinded not only the driver of the Mercedes, but the driver in the Fiat Uno and the paparazzi too. Everybody would have crashed into each other at the same time. It doesn't make sense.
Levistre claimed to have seen the flash of light in his rear-view mirror while travelling at over 60 miles an hour through the tunnel.
That witness was heard, and his account was analysed again and again. The conclusion was that he was not a reliable witness. Several witnesses stepped forward, claiming they'd seen things, for the most part things they'd read in newspapers. You can't stop people from seeking the limelight and trying to make money out of it.
No other witness supported Francois Levistre's claim to have seen a massive flash of light before the crash. And Levistre had a dubious background. In 1988, he'd been arrested for trying to sell his wife's unborn baby in a blaze of publicity.
On a choisi de donner cet enfant parce que j'en ai discuté avec mon épouse, parce que cet enfant qui pourrait venir au mois de septembre ne serait pas le bienvenu chez nous.
A year after the crash, Levistre elaborated on his story. In a British newspaper, he claimed he might have caused the crash by accidentally swerving in front of the Mercedes carrying Princess Diana. But he's never talked to the French police about this. The overarching conspiracy that links the security services to the fatal crash comes with a far more sinister explanation for the Fiat Uno, the car that was hit from behind by the Mercedes shortly before it crashed. Conspiracists claim the missing Uno driver was part of the assassination plot, and this explains why he's never been found. Six months after the crash, private detectives working for Mohammed El Fayed came up with a possible driver, James Anderson. He was one of the top paparazzi photographers in France. Anderson had been part of the pack following Princess Diana and Dodi El Fayed in Saint-Tropez.
Police officers from my team and forensic experts were sent to examine the car. They found the Fiat Uno up on blocks with no wheels. It hadn't been used for months and months and months and months.
Journalist Tony Comiti had known Anderson for over 20 years. He made a documentary about him and filmed him in his white Uno.
The car couldn't get in second gear. It had 235,000 miles on the clock, no indicators and no brakes. James lived 175 miles from Paris. The car was in such bad condition, he would have had to put it on a train to get it there.
The French police carried out forensic tests on Anderson's Uno. Some paint samples matched the white marks found on the Mercedes carrying Princess Diana. Rubber samples from the bumper also matched traces on the Mercedes, and he'd replaced his left tail light. But the car showed no signs of having been involved in an accident. Furthermore, Anderson had a good alibi for the night in question. At midnight, Anderson was at home with his wife, 175 miles south of Paris. At 4 a.m, he travelled to Orly Airport and then took a 7:20 flight to Corsica. Anderson provided the French inquiry with airline tickets and toll road receipts to back up his story. But skeptics argue Anderson's alibi could have been faked by the secret services.
I am personally convinced, as are many people, that Anderson was driving the Fiat Uno, his Fiat Uno, that night in the Alma Tunnel. It was he who swerved in front of the Mercedes and set in motion the situation that ended in Diana's death.
Botham says Anderson was there to force the Mercedes to crash. He claims Anderson had links with the British Secret Services and he'd been involved in other assassination plots.
James Anderson was being investigated actively by French Special Branch, who I spoke to. He had this strange habit of being present when people either committed suicide or were murdered. He was with them, probably the last person to see them or photograph them.
The French eliminated Anderson from their inquiry. 2 years later, he was found burnt to death in his car in remote countryside, 250 miles away from his home. Skeptics claimed he'd been silenced.
He started to boast that he'd been there the night Diana died, that he knew things other people didn't know, and that he could tell a real story if he wanted to. I think those reports got out to the wrong people.
His friends find the idea that he was involved in a Secret Service assassination plot unbelievable.
He was too fat, James Anderson, to work for the Secret Services. He wanted everybody to believe that he came from a noble British family, but the poor guy didn't even speak a word of English. No, all that, it's just lies, rumours that tarnish his work.
The real reason for his death may be altogether more personal.
There was probably something going on in his love life. James, at a photo session in Saint-Tropez, told a group of us about a photographer whose wife had been unfaithful. He said, "If the same thing ever happens to me, I will commit suicide. I will have my last cigar and set myself on fire." And mysteriously, he died just like that, 3 years later.
A French judge investigated Anderson's death and concluded it was suicide. No witnesses have come forward to place him in Paris on the night of the crash, and no evidence has been produced to link Anderson to MI6. The conspiracy theorists have one final card to play. They say it provides both the motive and the urgency for the Secret Service plot to kill Princess Diana. It all hinges on a conversation Mohammed Al-Fayed says he had with Princess Diana on the night of the crash.
She was pregnant, and I know that. Yeah.
How did you know that?
She told me on the phone.
She told you on the phone?
Yeah.
The world's press needed no encouragement to start this conspiracy rolling. They searched back through their archive and found this picture of Diana in Saint-Tropez. Was this a tight swimsuit or evidence of pregnancy? French medical services made no checks to see if Diana was pregnant when she died.
The injuries that Princess Diana sustained meant that the question of whether or not she was pregnant never arose. As a result, there were no blood tests to check for pregnancy.
But André Leonhardt has seen copies of the post-mortem carried out on Princess Diana in England 24 hours after the crash and after her body had been embalmed.
The autopsy showed that she was not pregnant. The embalming was requested by her family to make her more presentable, because some time would pass between her leaving Paris and her funeral in Britain.
But Mohammed Al-Fayed believes the embalming was carried out to cover up evidence of her pregnancy.
The discovery that Princess Diana's body was embalmed in Paris within hours of her death. What reason can there be other than it was part of cover-up to prevent proper forensic test in the UK?
10 days before she died, Princess Diana visited this clinic in London for treatment of premenstrual tension. Checks carried out by her consultant, Dr. Lily Hua, confirmed that Diana was not pregnant. Diana's close friend, Rosa Monckton, says having to constantly face these very personal claims causes real upset to Princes William and Harry.
And there's no elegant way of saying this, and I wish I didn't have to, but she could not have been pregnant when she was with me on the boat in Greece, which was between the 15th and the 20th of August. She had her period. So There's no way she could have been pregnant by the 30th of August.
But the conspiracists remain defiant. The theory changes shape, finding its way around even the most awkward evidence. Ultimately, it becomes a leap of faith.
What people don't realise is it does not matter if Diana was pregnant or not. It's whether people believed she was pregnant that matters. Whether the establishment in Britain believed that the princess, the mother of the future King of England, was about to give birth to a half-Muslim child.
As conspiracy piles on conspiracy, is there any evidence to support Mohammed Al Fayed's claims of a secret service plot to kill Princess Diana?
The only problem with Mohammed Fayed's theory of the royal family and MI6 being behind the murder of Princess Diana is that it doesn't have a shred of credible evidence to support it. It's a wonderful tale. It would make a great novel, but it's just not the truth.
This week, Lord Stevens will make his judgment on the events of that night. It's hard to see how he will conclude the crash was anything other than an accident. The driver of the Mercedes, Henri Paul, was drunk at the wheel, with a potent mix of alcohol and drugs in his system, and driving too fast for the road. French lawyers believe the final verdict could prove uncomfortable for the millionaire boss of the Ritz.
Mr. Al Fayed, if he had been taken to court, could have been sued for damages. According to French law, the employer is responsible for his employee's actions whilst on duty. Henri Paul was driving the car whilst on duty under his boss, Mr. Al Fayed's orders. Therefore, Mr. Al Fayed is responsible for the accident.
The Metropolitan Police inquiry is likely to support the French view that the chasing paparazzi were an important influence on the speed of the Mercedes.
There was a horde of photographers who were following the couple, and they were very close to the Mercedes when the accident happened. Obviously, this causes annoyance and stress, but it is not the only explanation. The driver also lost control of the car. That's obvious.
Those who are close to Princess Diana don't want the speculation and controversy surrounding her death to be the defining feature of her life.
For the princes particularly, it has been very difficult for them. I think they find it, the sort of public ownership of their mother, a very difficult thing. And remember how young they were when she died, and to have this, you know, literally nearly 10 years after their mother's death, constantly saying, was she pregnant, was she going to be engaged, is very upsetting for them, for both of them.
If you want to find out more about this programme and others in the Conspiracy Files series, which continues in the new year on BBC Two, log on to our website bbc.co.uk/conspiracy files. Test yourself against our survey of the biggest conspiracy stories of the last 2 decades and tell us what